This material is made available to you by or on behalf of the University of Melbourne under Section 113P of the Copyright Act 1968. It may be subject to copyright. For more information, visit the University Copyright website.
I chose to study the Bachelor of Arts because I am really interested in questions about how society works and how we can make it better.
I chose University of Melbourne because I was researching which university suits my interest, and I found that University of Melbourne is the best for my major in psychology and sociology.
I'm majoring in politics and economics, and I'm very motivated to understand the world around me, and I think that politics and economics is a great way to see how people work together and how we can shape those areas of the world.
The thing I enjoy the most about being a Bachelor of Arts student is everyone comes from the different backgrounds and cultures, and the class discussions in lectures and tutorials are really interesting. My Bachelor of Arts will help me in the future because my study here taught me to think critically and analyze complex information.
I think the core part of being a Bachelor of Arts student is about being constantly on your toes, and that always means that you're growing and you're becoming a new person throughout every subject that you do. One of the highlights of that process is making sure that you see the world in a better way or challenge your original assumptions about how things work.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Partially Steekum. I'm the Program Director of the Bachelor of Arts and Associate Dean in the Faculty of Arts. And it's my great pleasure tonight to tell you a little bit about our undergraduate program, the BA, and some related programs at undergraduate level as well. There is quite a bit of information I'm hoping to share with you tonight about the nature of our academic programs, the structure of the degree, and so on. But probably the most difficult thing, and in some ways the most important thing that we're hoping to give you some sense of by the end of this evening is what it's like to be a BA student, what the student experience might be like. We're very, very fortunate tonight to have a student panel who'll be talking to us later about their own experiences. But if I had to strike a theme early on in this discussion, it would be that for each of our BA students, the journey that they take is unique, it's different. There's a lot of opportunity, as I'll discuss, to chart their own course through the degree, to really sculpt their own experience, depending on the outcomes that they want, the passions that they have, and what suits them best. But I thought it might be useful just to start by characterising some of the strongest elements of the student experience, certainly elements of the BA student experience that we're very enthusiastic about. We really do encourage our students to embrace, all of which are aligned with the outcomes, the learning outcomes of our curriculum, but which also bring with them a large number of opportunities, sometimes optional opportunities, around the curriculum as well. So to start with, hopefully one of the more exciting ones for many students, it is a global experience in the BA. The large proportion of our students at some point in their studies, and usually after their first year, in their second year, in their third year, later in their studies, will undertake some form of study abroad. And it can be quite diverse now. Typically, still the most popular is perhaps the most traditional, which is a full semester exchange program with one of our almost 200 institutional partners, university partners around the globe. But increasingly, students are taking up short course study abroad, intensive programs, perhaps in our summer or winter period, in January, February, or July, and we have an increasing number of our own subjects taught by our own academics offshore in the particular countries they're studying in boring places like Paris and Shanghai and Venice and so on. This is obviously a very important part of, as I say, the curriculum aims that we have in ensuring students have that experience, are prepared, to live in a global world, but it's also one of the elements that our students, perhaps more than many others, embrace fully from the start. And if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, perhaps this is the degree for you. If that sounds like something you wouldn't go within a million miles of, perhaps this is not the right degree for you. The Bachelor of Arts at the University of Melbourne is also very much focused on ensuring that students are equipped to lead. Now, obviously what lead means can vary depending on the careers that they go into, the experiences they have later in life. Yes, a little bit later I will show you some statistics about how many of our, or proportion rather, of our alumni are in leadership roles in their careers in the various businesses that they're working in and so on. But leadership for us means obviously something much larger than that. And so whilst it is, again, aligned with the objectives of our teaching curriculum that I'll come to a little bit later, we encourage students to take up roles as leaders among the student community, particularly in our various mentoring and peer learning programs. And in fact, some of you, if you come and join us at first year, might experience from the other side of the table, so to speak, our arts peer mentoring program where, I was going to say older, that's probably the wrong way of putting it, more advanced undergraduate students act as mentors for first year commencing students. We also have a somewhat formalised study group program. It's an internationally accredited program called Peer Assisted Study Scheme, PASS, where we encourage students who have completed subjects to come back to those subjects later in their study careers and help to lead study groups of current students in those subjects to share some of their experience, to convey some of their knowledge. And we see this as really activating that element of leadership that we're building in the curriculum while students are studying with us. And also, despite perhaps some caricatures of this sort of a liberal arts program, it's a very applied program as well. Internships are available to every single Bachelor of Arts students. We have a program called simply, we're not, as you probably will gather as time goes on, we're not particularly inventive necessarily with titles. We have a program called the Arts Internship, which does make an internship in a whole variety of different, with a whole variety of different partners and a whole variety of different sectors indeed, commercial, not-for-profit, cultural, business, government and so on, to every BA student should they wish to take that up. Again, as with the study abroad opportunities, these tend to be opportunities students will take up in their second or their third year, not necessarily in their first, but it is there for every BA student and we do strongly encourage it. Also, in some of the specific majors, there are embedded internship or, as well as that, industry project opportunities. The industry project is a project which is provided to us by one of our industry partners, or again, I'm using industry quite broadly here, it might be from the not-for-profit sector or from government agencies, which is provided, authentic projects provided to our students where they will largely work in project teams on campus. They'll have some interaction, some visits with the partner, but they'll work on real projects and provide real outcomes to those partners who can then pick up the ideas or not pick up the ideas as they see fit. And we've had a lot of very successful projects with students already with real impacts in the world, not necessarily in the career directions that they themselves are aspiring to go, but very translatable experience. And it's one of the ways in which we don't like to think of the students' careers starting after they graduate. We like to think of them starting while they're still studying with us. And I've already mentioned the not-for-profit sector, and volunteering is an important part of that for us as well. Within a larger concern, with this kind of a sense of community and thinking in terms, as liberal arts programs such as ours often do in a very deep fashion about the role of the individual within a society, in a community, to enable students to actively give back to their community, in this country, locally, and also globally around the world, through programs that are within our curriculum, that are credited, that have an academic framework to them. So that means, I'm afraid to say, things like assessment and reading and all sorts of stuff like that connected with them. Somewhat akin actually in structure to our internship programs, but allowing students to see again an impact of the work that they're putting in, the effort that they're putting in areas that they're passionate about themselves while they're studying and not waiting until graduation. And the last thing I would say about the characteristics of the student experience before I get on to the nuts and bolts of the course is the BA student community is an exceptionally vibrant one. I think you'll see that immediately when we move to our student panel a little bit later. Just about every club, I'm exaggerating a tiny bit, but not as much as you might think, just about every club on campus will have in its executive BA students as the movers and shakers of those activities. We obviously do very much encourage students to get involved, but that doesn't require very much encouragement on our part. They are an engaged student community, and that shows, I think, very, very clearly right across the university, and is something they carry on into later life. I'm not sure to what extent we can take credit for that. I think that's something that students typically bring with them when they start. And again, if that sounds like something you would feel engaged with, then this might be the program for you. So although often this is left right to the end, as you've probably already gathered from the aspects of the student experience that I've chosen to highlight now, we're thinking very much about not just the time that students are studying with us, say the 3 years that they might be studying the BA, or maybe a little bit longer if they choose to go on to a graduate program after that. We're thinking in terms of their lives as a whole, not just careers either. The focus is very, very often, and appropriately so, and I understand why, on careers, but thinking more broadly of carrying on what you learn and the experiences that you pick up during university into your later life, and that being powerful for you, that being useful for each of you. As I mentioned, and I'm sorry to do this, I always cringe a little bit when statistics are brought up, but we are very successful, and successful in general terms, but particularly compared to other similar cognate arts programs in the country in terms of not just career outcomes, and as the statistics here highlight, also the quality of those outcomes, and the quality of those outcomes over the whole career. So hence the large number of our graduates who do find themselves eventually, and unsurprising from the point of view of someone who spends a lot of time designing the curriculum to generate this, find themselves in leadership roles, in leading roles of one type or another, or in some cases, although there's a lesser number of these, who actually start up and create their own opportunities. If I was to show you a list of all of the different areas of life that our graduates go into, it would be an exceptionally long list. I picked here maybe the areas in which perhaps there are clusters of graduates in the last 5 to 10 years. And this again is the point, and I'm sorry I do this, but I am an academic, so I've got to footnote everything. At this point, I would pause and just say, this is the last 5 to 10 years. What we can't show you is 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future, or even perhaps 20 or 30 years in the future that may be relevant to most of you sitting here in the audience now when you're thinking about your future. Very few people can. I know there are some professional futurists who try to tell us what the future holds, but there are a lot of unknowns. And that too we try to take account of in designing the curriculum, in sculpting as best we can the opportunities for students. The way we like to think about it is trying to prepare students and to be graduates, I suppose, not just for the challenges and the opportunities that we see now that might be reflected by lists such as these or statistics such as the ones I showed you before, but to prepare students for the challenges and the opportunities we're yet to foresee. And if we really do our job well and students are really engaged in their studies and grasp the opportunities that are presented to them, to maybe even equip those students to create the opportunities in the future that we are yet to even imagine. So, or anyone who shows you a list like this or gives you statistics about their graduate outcomes is already talking about the past. They're not talking about the future, and I do like to be upfront about that, but at the same time to emphasise that that is absolutely something we're taking into account and potentially one of the great strengths of a liberal arts education in terms of preparing graduates for the challenges that are yet to come. And if you come along to future events, and it may vary among those who are here now, for some of you this might be your first point of engagement thinking about the Melbourne BA as a possibility. Some of you might already have come along to other events, whether open days or others, and had an opportunity to talk to some of our alumni reflecting on their experiences. I mentioned tonight we'll be hearing from current students, but I would encourage you, if you can come along to other events, to listen to some of our alumni talk about how the sorts of skills, yes, but also the broader experience of a BA has really equipped them and driven them into the quite diverse futures that they have lived and are still living. So this is the bit where, this is the boring bit, where I tell you about the structure, the academic content and structure of the degree. And as I mentioned at the outset, really the BA is a very tailorable program in many ways. There are certain core requirements, there are certain key features to the academic program, the curriculum, the structure, but within that there's a great deal of scope for students to choose what they want to do, directions that they want to take, and so on. Sometimes that can be felt as a bit of a burden of choice, and certainly students do need to be well informed to make the right choices for them. And this is only a first step along the road to thinking about what the best choices for you might be, of course. But as I mentioned, the curriculum is aligned, as you can see here, with many of the broader features of the student experience in the BA. These are the aspirations. They're not particularly unique, they're perhaps not particularly surprising, but each one of these aligns with features that we've been very, very careful to design into the curriculum to provide for students in their academic study as well as outside. There are a large number of study areas in the BA, and that, at first, as I said, that's exciting. We certainly think it's exciting, the breadth of potential areas to specialise in and to study as deeply as you might wish in the BA, although sometimes that can be a little bewildering at first. You would have picked up, of course, the arts brochure which lists those broad study areas. Information is on the website and so on. Each student in the BA does need to choose one of those areas to specialise in. This is what we call the major, that I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a second. Around the major, however, they can choose subjects as arts electives for any number of the other fields that they're not specialising in. So any of the other almost 30 different, slightly more than 30 now, different study areas. And similarly, they can choose some subjects from completely outside those study areas within the component of the curriculum called breadth. And I'll touch on each of those different components, the major, the electives, breadth, and so on as we go. We also, and I'll come back to this a number of times in the next few minutes, we also teach 13 languages, different languages. All of them from complete beginners, or if you've already been studying those languages, there is a possibility to enter at a more advanced stream and take those languages as full major sequences if you wish, or just a few subjects there. So if you were simply, and if you start to explore, not just at Melbourne, but you start to explore many bachelor courses, you'll see a lot of these colourful plans. This in abstract is what the subject plan of a BA might look like without the individual, not populated with the individual subjects. So as you'll see, there is a core introductory unit in your first semester called the Arts Foundation subject. I'll say a few very, very quick words about that in a moment. The spine, so to speak, the depth of the degree in many ways is the major, marked out there in blue. Now this is based on a plan with just a single major, and you'll see there it's 7 subjects, and the Arts Foundation is sort of counted as the intro to the major, so effectively we think of it as 8 subjects all together. 8 subjects out of 24 as a whole, 8 subjects each year, 4 subjects in each of the standard semesters, if you do want to stick with the standard 2 semesters each year, 24 subjects over 3 years. 8 of those would be your major, one of those 8 being the Arts Foundation. But as you see, that leaves a large scope for electives, as I mentioned. And also, and I'll say a couple of words about this in a second too, the breadth component, which can be 4 to 6 subjects, depending on how many electives or breadth you want to take, which can be taken from any subjects offered at undergraduate level at the University of Melbourne outside of those arts study areas. So I'll flesh out a little bit each of these components, the Arts Foundation, the major, breadth, and so on now. So as I mentioned, we have an introductory subject, a foundation subject, which is really very much designed to be the first subject you study at university, so focusing on transition to university level study, the sorts of skills you need, the ways of thinking about the subject material, which we focus on here. There's 6 subjects in total, but they share a great deal of curriculum. So students only choose one of these, but they do have slightly different content to hopefully provide something that students are interested in. As you can see, they take in some ways a much broader approach. If you can see just from the titles, they take a much broader approach than many of the other subjects that students might be studying would take, because they are focused on the foundation, or they are focused on the things which unite the various disciplines across humanities and social sciences and languages, rather than the particular disciplinary distinctiveness that students will be learning, for instance, in their majors or in their elective subjects. As I say, the ideal here is that students take this in their first semester. They will be taking other subjects at the same time, but this is essentially the first subject, the introductory subject to university study. These, and I don't expect you to take a snapshot of this, because all of this, as I mentioned, is reflected in much more detail in the brochure that you would have picked up tonight, in kind of the online handbook and so on. These are the various fields of study that fall within arts, humanities, social sciences and languages as they're defined within the BA. In arts programs across the world, really, you'll struggle to find any 2 that have precisely the same disciplines offered, fields of study offered in them, although of course you will find particular ones that recur with great frequency, are traditionally there. This is currently those that we offer. You'll also notice there, and as I said, I love my footnotes, but you'll note there that the asterisks noting some that are only available as minors. All of the others are available as majors or minors. The BA is currently, I think it still is currently, I say this every year and I wait for the other degrees to do it, but I think the BA is still currently the only program here at the University of Melbourne that offers accredited minors as well as majors. A minor is just a shorter sequence, so if you think of the major as a sequence of 8 subjects, a minor is a sequence of 6 subjects in a particular specialisation. If you do as many of 6, we will note that on your transcript as a minor. You can't do a minor instead of a major. You have to do a full major in depth, but you can do a minor as well as a major. So a major in one discipline and a minor in another, if you wish. And as you might have, if you've done some quick calculations, you might have noticed from the course plan that I showed you, it is actually possible to fit 2 full majors, take a double major within the BA should you wish to, still within the same limit of those 24 subjects, of course. So I'd encourage you, in your own time, of course, to look through things such as the brochure that you picked up tonight, look through the online handbook, come along to open days and so on, and explore the different subject areas, because again, you need to, for the BA at Melbourne to be right for you, there needs to be something there, and more than just one area of study, in fact, because you're taking electives around it as well as your major, that really appeals to you, that you really feel you can be engaged with, passionate about, and study hard and in depth. I mentioned breadth studies, and I characterise in a very simple, maybe simplistic way, in terms of any other subjects at the University of Melbourne at undergraduate level that aren't within those specialisations. But that is broadly true. That there is a huge number. If there's a lot of different areas of study, and each of those areas of study would offer at least 8 subjects each, and sometimes considerably more, so you multiply that again by a factor of 8 or 10. If there's a huge number of subjects available within the core BA for students to choose from, there's an exponentially larger number available for breadth study as well. Now, breadth is there really to encourage students not to explore different ways of understanding the world outside of the disciplines that they're studying in depth within their degree. To really extend their skill set, absolutely, but expand the ways in potentially they can approach, thinking about the world, approach problems, and so on. There are a number of different ways that students think about their choices in breadth. Sometimes they think very much in complementary terms, what would complement the programs that I'm taking within my core degree. Sometimes students have existing interests and passions, maybe from high school, maybe from their own lives, that are outside the core areas of their degree that they can still keep up, they can still pursue through breadth. On some occasions, and we do encourage this, students choose to be a little adventurous with what they do for breadth and maybe take up things that they'd never thought about taking before. It is an opportunity which gives as much to you as you're willing to look for, and as I mentioned, there is a lot of choice, but as with all of these, there are a large number of resources and a large number of people at the university who are there to help guide students along the way. So if you populate the course plan, or something like the course plan that I showed you before, it might come out a little bit like this. Now this in particular it's just an example, but we chose the example of someone who wanted to major in psychology and do a minor in development studies, and chose particular subjects. There's choice among the subjects for each of these programs, particularly at level 2 at second year and at third year. And it might look something like this. Now, what I've showed you here is a very standardised course plan. It's realistic. It's certainly a course plan that a student could indeed take, and some almost certainly have taken this. But it's set along that 3-year structure. The idea that a student is taking 4 subjects every semester for 3 years flat, and they finish. And many of our students do that. But there's an increasingly large number of flexible study options. The BA has always been available to study part-time, and in all kinds of permutations, in fact, of part-time, that students swap and change from part-time to full-time as they move through their degree for a whole variety of reasons, things that happen in their lives, other opportunities that they might have, or just personal preference for how they learn. Similarly, there's an increasing number of intensive subjects that are available outside of those standard semesters, such as in January and February, or in June, July, and not just the study abroad intensives that I mentioned a little bit earlier. So this is a standardised plan, and most student plans will deviate from it some way, but hopefully gives you a bit of a sense of how you might do a standard major with a minor sequence. Or, and I mentioned the double major, so just to give you a sense of how that might factor in, here's an example of a double major in economics and media and communications. And the consequence of that you'll notice, there's no more subjects. Students always ask, is it harder to study a double major than a single major? Well, no. You're still studying the same number of subjects at the same pace that you want to study those subjects. But what does happen is you're studying just 2 areas in a great deal of depth, and there's much less scope for arts electives. So there's less scope for you to explore outside of those two areas. But it's a completely viable course approach. As well as this, so that is essentially, that's the curriculum structure of, and something about the content of the Bachelor of Arts, the academic core of the BA. But students at the University of Melbourne can also, at the same time they're studying their bachelor degree, take up what we call a concurrent diploma. So they're enrolled at the same time in the BA and a concurrent diploma in a few key areas that the university has identified as broadly important and broadly potentially adding to the skill set regardless of what degrees you might do. A diploma in languages. Informatics has actually changed its name. I know this, so by next year it's going to be called the Diploma in Computer Science, because apparently no one knew what informatics meant. Who knew? Diploma in Mathematical Sciences and Diploma in Music. What a concurrent diploma really does is it allows you to extend the number of subjects that you are studying by taking a designated focus sequence, really equivalent to a major, so it's 8 subjects, in one of these areas, languages, maths or so on. Half of those 4 subjects will be cross-credited to your BA. So for instance, if you were doing a diploma in languages, and given that all of the languages are one of the art specialisations currently, 4 of those subjects will be credited to your arts electives within the BA, and 4 would be in addition to the 24 subjects you take in the BA. If you were doing maths, then 4 of those would be credited to the breadth component of your BA, and 4 would be in addition. This does mean, as that additional 4 subjects is probably suggested, that typically this extends the study period by 6 months, by 3 months really, but one semester, one additional semester to finish those additional 4 subjects. But at the end of that, you get 2 pieces of paper, one of which is a demonstrable qualification in the area of the concurrent diploma, which is great when you graduate and you walk across the stage and everyone is deeply, deeply impressed, so I strongly encourage it. Your parents are very proud, and if you haven't gathered this yet, guys, making your parents proud is your #1 priority, just so you're aware of that. And it's an option that many of our students take up. Even with languages, you can of course take exactly the same sequence within your BA, but maybe there's other things you want to do. Maybe, like the previous plan, you really want to do a double major in economics and media and communications, but at the same time you really wanted to keep up that study in Japanese and have that qualification at the end. You can do it with a concurrent diploma and effectively get the equivalent of really 3 majors in essence. So an option to consider, not a requirement of course, but certainly an option that many of our students take up. Diploma in language, and this is really an excuse for me to flag the particular languages we teach, but the diploma in languages, just like languages within the BA as a major or as elective subjects, offers entry points from complete beginners, and these are the languages, so complete beginners in any of these languages, or if you've already studied it at high school to VCE level, you can start at a slightly more advanced entry point and still complete an 8-subject sequence in each of these. Now, the diploma in languages, you would only take one, or as with a major, you would only take one of these language streams. And look, we are expanding our language suite, so by the time, maybe the time some of you start, if we're thinking into the future, there might be more languages there, but that's currently the list of languages that we teach in full sequence. There's a few other little languages that we don't teach to a full 8 sequence, like things like ancient Egyptian and so on, which I'm sure you'd be very interested in, but aren't part of the diploma because they aren't a major in themselves. So the concurrent diplomas are effectively an additional degree, as I said, even though they might simply in practice mean extending your BA by 4 subjects. This is the point where I'm going to hand over, I believe, to my colleague to talk through some of the entry requirements for the BA. This is the stuff that's probably on all of your minds now. And I'll come back in a few moments to introduce our student panel. Nikki,
cool, no worries.
do you need that?
Oh, sure. Hi everyone, so my name is Nikki Hasinghouse and I'm a recruitment relationship coordinator with the Central Onshore team. So we work very closely with the Faculty of Arts to talk to prospective undergraduate students about the possibility of studying arts. So in terms of, oh, you can't hear me. Perfect. So in terms of the entry requirements for the Bachelor of Arts, for Australian Year 12s, for a minimum ATAR, we're looking at around 85. And I suppose my advice to you with the ATAR is you should treat your preferences, the 8 of them that you have, like a wish list. So as long as you think you have the capacity to meet that ATAR or roundabouts and you've met the entry requirements, so for us with arts here at Melbourne, you'd be looking for at least a 25 in one of your English subjects, so it would be either English, English literature or English language, and then of course if you're an EAL or ESL student you'd be looking for a 30. So as long as you've met that requirement and you feel that you'll probably be in the ballpark of the ATAR of 85, my recommendation is definitely to consider listing the Bachelor of Arts at the University of Melbourne on your list of preferences through VTAC. So in terms of the IB, obviously the IB scores will change each year, but we're looking at around about a 31, and again you're required to take English at either higher level or standard level. So either or is fine, it's just important that, like with VCE, you meet the English requirement. Moving on. We do offer 2 extended programs here at the University of Melbourne for students who identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. One of them is the Bachelor of Science Extended and the other is the Bachelor of Arts Extended. Now the Bachelor of Arts Extended is a 4-year program that's administered between the Faculty of Arts and the Murrup Institute for Indigenous Development, and they're the team here at the university that support our Indigenous staff and students during their time here at the university, and are also a key team in helping us to celebrate Indigenous culture on campus. The way that they support the Indigenous students who undertake the extended program is that there are a number of additional subjects, foundation subjects, that are part of the structure, and you'll be able to see that in both the undergraduate course brochure as well as the arts brochure. And there are various kind of mentoring and support programs and opportunities that are also involved in that program. So it's a really, really good offer. Students have the choice of either undertaking the Bachelor of Arts Extended if they identify as an Indigenous person, or they can undertake the run-of-the-mill Bachelor of Arts 3-year program if they're not interested in the additional opportunities and support. The requirements there are an ATAR of 50 or above. Application is still through VTAC, and it's a selection committee, obviously, between the 2 teams that identify suitable applicants. The next program I'd like to draw your attention to is Access Melbourne. So Access Melbourne is the way we at Melbourne, I suppose, refer to the CEASE process, so the Special Entry Access Scheme that runs through VTAC. So many of you would know that the Special Entry Access Scheme is an application that you do once you lodge your preferences. It goes through the MyInfo portal at VTAC, and it's an opportunity for you to select from a number of categories regarding disadvantage you might have experienced, if it's something that might impact you. So you might be English might be your first language, you might be an Indigenous person, so an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, you might be a student with a disadvantaged financial background, you might be located in a rural, remote or regional area. There are a number of different categories, and Access Melbourne is our way of identifying students in those categories to ensure that those experiences and that disadvantage isn't a barrier to them coming on to study at the University of Melbourne. So each year we guarantee that we'll have 20% of places in all of our undergraduate courses, which would include the Bachelor of Arts, for students who are from Access Melbourne categories. And generally speaking, we actually go up to around 30% of our offers are made to Access Melbourne students. And that's really our way of making sure that any disadvantage or difficulty that you might have experienced during your studies isn't something that then stays with you and stops you from achieving your goals of going to university and doing well and enjoying your time in tertiary study. So that's definitely something to think about. If you have questions about that, really good people to talk to would be your parents or your guardians, so your kind of key supporters. You can speak to your school as well, your careers advisors and your coordinators. Of course, you're most welcome to speak to teams here at the University of Melbourne, and we'll treat our conversations with you in the strictest of confidence. We'd also encourage you to speak to VTAC as well directly if you need any advice around how to apply effectively, making sure that you're adding the appropriate documentation and that basically you're giving us everything we need to make an assessment. The last thing I'll say about Access Melbourne is the whole process is entirely confidential, and it doesn't impact your journey at the University of Melbourne or any other university that you might do a CEAS application for, more generally at VTAC, once you get an offer. Of course, there are lots of support services available for you though, so if you do come in under the Access Melbourne program and you do need continued support, perhaps you have a disability, perhaps housing and financial aid might be something we need to assist you with, well, that's certainly something we can discuss with you, but that's completely up to you. So this is just, I suppose, the list of the categories that are available that I've already mentioned. There are a range of categories that the University of Melbourne considers. The key things with these categories is documentation is very important. So if there's a category you're applying for, it may need maybe some personal details, so your location or your age. It may need some details around maybe a family tax benefit aid demonstration from Centrelink for financial aid, or it might need a letter from a coordinator or similar person. So just make sure that you read all of that information and you apply by the due date, which generally closes in October, with all of the necessary information. And as I said, we're certainly here to help you if you need. The other key thing about the Access Melbourne program is there are a couple of guarantees in place. So if you are an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person, or you are from a rural, regional or remote location, or you have demonstrated financial disadvantage, as long as you've met the subject prerequisites, which we discussed before, so that was meeting the English requirements for the Bachelor of Arts, you may be guaranteed a place subject to meeting the minimum ATARs that are set for Access Melbourne. So these ATARs still need to be confirmed by our academic board, and they meet in June, so I think we're probably just a couple of weeks too early for them. So it's a bit of a watch this space. These will be updated, definitely by the end of the month. But effectively, if you get any of the ATARs listed up here and you've met the subject prerequisites, you're guaranteed a place at the University of Melbourne. And of course, if you come through the Access Melbourne program, either with a guaranteed place or through any of the other categories, and of course you can apply for multiple ones if that's applicable, you'll also be eligible for a range of scholarships. Some of these conversations about eligibility can be, I suppose, confidential, so if you want to pull us over to the side at the end of this and have a conversation about your circumstances, we're more than happy to talk to you about that. So in terms of scholarships, I'll skip to the second one first because I've just spoken about access. There are a range of access and equity scholarships that follow on from successful application to the University of Melbourne through the CEAS Access Melbourne program. So if that's something that's relevant to you, it might be a bursary, it might be a relocation allowance because you're moving from Morwell or somewhere in the Western District. That might be something that will be relevant. Of course, we reward academic excellence, so students who are, I suppose, leaders in their subjects with excellent results and really, really high achievers will also be rewarded by the University of Melbourne with a range of scholarships, both at the kind of top level, so I'll talk about the Chancellor's Scholarship next, but also at faculty level as well. When you're entering University of Melbourne, we will automatically consider you for those scholarships, so there's no extra boxes to tick or any other processes to go through. We will go through the process of assessing you and advising you if you're eligible. We have 10 residential colleges at the University of Melbourne, and there's a very, very generous scholarship program in place at each of those colleges. So if you're thinking of college, my advice to you would be to have a look at the different colleges that are available around the Crescent at the University of Melbourne, have a look at the ones that probably fit you best, and then speak to those individual colleges about what their scholarship programs are, because each college has a different scholarship offering, and you need to speak to them separately about what those are and what might fit your case. The last one, of course, is overseas study. I'm sure Pasha's probably already referenced the fact that we really encourage students to consider going overseas, either for a short-term intensive program or perhaps for anything up to 6 months. We have quite a significant pool of money there to support you in different ways, and there are different criteria for eligibility. So it's not just based on the highest achievers, it might also be based on where you'd like to go, it might be based on any number of things. So it's definitely something that you should look into. Of course, there are scholarships that you'll be able to apply for during your undergraduate study, and then a whole range of new scholarships available to you should you continue to go on to graduate study too. So it's just something that we'll continue talking to you about if you come to the University of Melbourne. So the Chancellor Scholarship Program, Melbourne Chancellor Scholarship was something that I referenced just before around high achievers. So if anyone in this room is lucky enough to get a 99.9 ATAR, and believe me when I say most of the time that we speak to the people who achieve these scores, they never expected it. So it's quite possible that some of you in this room may be that person. These are scholarships that really reward students who've gone above and beyond with their results, as you can see. So this is the one scholarship in Australia where we will pay for your undergraduate degree. So that is a cost around $30,000 to $35,000 that the university will cover for you for your undergraduate study, which is very significant. And that's what tuition fee exempt undergraduate Commonwealth supported place. So a Commonwealth supported place is a place at the University of Melbourne for students who identify as permanent residents or Australian citizens. We'll also give you the opportunity to study overseas with a generous overseas study scholarship, and we also give you a guaranteed place in your preferred course, so a graduate course. So that might be that you might consider going on to perhaps the Juris Doctor or into a Master of Public Policy or something else obscure amongst the many, many wonderful Masters offerings at the University of Melbourne. So that's definitely something that's in place for you should you wish to continue your study with us. We've already talked a little bit about the extended programs, but I suppose just to go back about the offerings of the Barak Institute for Indigenous Development. So there's a range of things that we do to support students who identify as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander here at the university and would like to engage with the Barak team during their studies, which, as I said, is an entirely optional thing. There are fantastic engagement activities on campus, both for Indigenous and non-Indigenous students and staff, because it's very important for the university to celebrate culture and community here on campus. There are really wonderful transition orientation opportunities, really, really great tutoring and academic support available from the team themselves. And of course, I've already been through the offerings of the Extended Arts and Science program. For any Year 11s or lower in the room, I'd like to also draw your attention to the Extension program. So the Extension program is an opportunity for students who are going into Year 12 to undertake 2 subjects during their Year 12 at the University of Melbourne. So this program is free. Assessment is based on high academic standards, because as you can imagine, we want to make sure that you're able to take up the challenge of studying university subjects alongside your VCE or your IB, because it's a pretty tough time. You'll get credit towards the University of Melbourne degree. So as I said, the subjects are free, and of course the 2 subjects that you complete you'll actually be able to take forward when you start your study at the University of Melbourne, should you choose to. So every year we have quite a significant cohort of students, some of whom Pasha actually teaches himself, who do things like extension philosophy, extension history, extension Latin, and they then come on to the Bachelor of Arts and they are able to claim credits, so they go straight into the second year of that program at the University of Melbourne, should they choose to. If they don't want to go straight into second year, they can take a lighter load or fill the spaces with other subjects. So it really gives you a head start and lots of flexibility. Huge number of different areas available for you to choose from, and particularly for this audience, quite a significant number in the humanities and social sciences, but also many in languages, commerce, as well as a number of maths options too. The last couple of things I'll just cover before we head into the panel would be accommodation. So I do know that some of the people in the room tonight have travelled from quite far away to be here, and I thank you very much for taking the time to come and join us. As I mentioned before, we have 10 residential colleges and they're situated very close to the university, probably about between 5 and 10 minutes walk away from our location here. I like to refer to these in a very good way as big kids boarding schools. So you get your own room, you'll share a bathroom, you have food provided for you, there are academic programs to support you, there's a social, kind of a social calendar, sports, drama, music, a great offering for students, particularly in their first few years as they come to the university. There's a mix of both regional and rural, metro and international students that go to residential colleges, and it's a really great way to start off your experience if it's something you'd like to do. It's a great accommodation option, but it's not, of course, the only one. We have a range of different other options that students choose, particularly with support from our housing team, and they include things like the share housing and homestays, which you'd probably be very familiar with. We've also got reasonably fully serviced student apartments that come pre-prepared and pre-furnished, and where students are assisted in placing themselves into, it might be a 4-bedroom or a studio apartment or a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom. And then, of course, we have the student village that's run alongside the campus living team and the University of Melbourne, where we actually have a number of around about 600 beds that are filled entirely by University of Melbourne students. So those are great options. There are lots of different housing options you can choose from, and as I said, we've got the student services team in housing that will assist any students who need advice around where to stay. So the last couple of things here really is just upcoming events. So as you know, this is the first night of the My Melbourne Future program. It does run through till the 27th of June, and we'd be delighted to see you again at any other events that you'd like to come to, because of course we will be profiling every one of our undergraduate degrees and quite a large number of our graduate programs. A Day at Melbourne is a really great on-campus, I suppose, create your own adventure day where you get to venture around the campus, experience lots of presentations, really get your head around the fantastic space that we have here in terms of our sporting facilities, our libraries, our beautiful green spaces like South Lawn, and you'll get to meet lots of current students and really get a great, I suppose, taste of what the University of Melbourne student experience is like. Registrations for that event will open shortly, and I'd really encourage you to register for that if that's something you'd like to come to. The final event really, of course, is Open Day, and that's our flagship event every year. It's a huge kind of carnival festival experience where the university is entirely open. We've got lots of great activations, great presentations, including really detailed presentations about every single major that's available in every single program. So if you want to learn more about psychology, you can. If you want to learn more about history or philosophy or anthropology, sociology, social theory, you can do all of that at Open Day in quite a significant level of depth and speak one-on-one to the people who are responsible for teaching those programs. In terms of keeping in touch from here on in, you're most welcome to contact us, of course. We're here to help you, but we do have the central team at 13 Melb who'll happily take any of your calls or emails, and also happy to live chat with you during business hours too, so don't ever be afraid of taking that opportunity up. You can sign up for updates if you'd like, although if you have registered for this event and tick the box at the bottom, we'll keep you up to date and in the loop. But if you feel like you might have missed out on something, you can always jump in there and check your subscriptions so you're getting the information that you want from us. And of course, Course Search and the Future Students websites are also fantastic for giving you all of the up-to-date information, including the Access Melbourne guarantees when they're announced in a couple of weeks. So that's all from me, and I'm really, really glad to be able to hand back over to Pasha this evening to welcome our three panellists. So we've got Alex Torben, who is studying honours in art history and Australian Indigenous Studies and a diploma in languages in French. We have Lachlan Hines, and a major in economics, politics and international studies, so a first year, and also an Access Melbourne scholar. We also have Maggie Blandon. Maggie is a first-year current Bachelor of Arts student and a Chancellor's Scholar. And Maggie, I hope, doesn't mind me mentioning that she's also a resident at Trinity College. So if we have any college questions as well, Maggie probably wouldn't be a bad person to ask. So yes, thank you very much for listening, and I'll hand over.
Thank you, Nikki. So you've heard more than enough from us now, and given that one of the main focuses of this discussion is really on the student experience, it's time to hear from the students. I'm going to hand it completely over to them to run the show. I'm not going to prompt too much, but what I am hoping that they will provide some insight on is how they came to the University of Melbourne, how they came to the BA, what their experience has been like, and maybe if they're comfortable with sharing their future plans, where they see that experience taking them. So, Alex, would you like to start?
Hi everyone, my name's Alex. I'm in my 5th year of university now, so I did a 4-year Bachelor of Arts and Diploma of Languages, and then this 5th year is my honours year. So like Pasha mentioned, often with language diplomas you might add on some extra time, and for me that was an extra year, but I studied part-time. Just to backtrack a little bit, I graduated from high school in 2013. I grew up in Sale in Victoria, and then I came to university in 2014, started in the February of that year, and I went to a residential college. So that's where I lived for the first 3 years of my degree, and then I moved out and I lived by myself. In case anyone wants to know sort of how people do that, it's pretty normal to go to a college for 1, 2 or 3 years and then move into another kind of place to live. So in terms of my BCE experience, I studied a few different subjects. I remember when I was in year 11, I was really interested in doing medicine. So I was doing chemistry and biology and math methods, but I also studied visual communication and design and text and traditions. This is going to be a really long list, and art, and then I also did revolutions. So I did a lot of subjects. Some of them I didn't finish all the way until 3-4. And then I found that when I got to year 12, my interest in science was more of a curiosity than a really great skill set. And so I felt like it would be really useful to think about how I could kind of continue to explore that curiosity, and that's what drove me initially to an arts degree, because I liked that it was really flexible and that I could continue to sort of try out different things and find what suited me. So what I thought I would study was literature, and what I ended up studying was art history and Australian Indigenous Studies, and then I started French in my second year, and I did my breadths in education and fine arts. So a really wide variety of things. And yeah, for my honours now, I'm doing that in art history, but it's a pure honours in art history, so just one discipline, but it's influenced by the other things that I've studied.
Hi everyone, my name's Lockie, so I'm first year, so I'm sort of at the other end of the spectrum here, and I'm in my first semester. I'm originally from a small town in northern Tasmania called Georgetown, so about 3 months living in Melbourne now. So I'm assuming a lot of people don't know where that is, but basically I went to school in Launceston, so it's not really as the most rural place on the earth, but it gets close, I guess. So for me, I won't bore you too much. I've been up since 4:30 studying for an exam, so get excited for that, everyone, for the future. Just saying. But basically, as Prisha already said, I'm intending to major politics and international studies and economics. So I'm in my first semester, so obviously you don't actually have to make that commitment this year or even really next year. You sort of have to start figuring it out by next year, but you don't really have to commit to it straight away. For me, I guess it's because I've already sort of thought about what I want to get out of university, and for me, I guess that's why I chose Melbourne in the first place, and that really is my desire to actually study law as a postgraduate degree, so be the Juris Doctor. So it's obviously law is quite different studied at Melbourne than it is at a lot of other universities around Australia. For me, living in a small town, I was going to have to move about 3 hours away anyway to study law, so I thought, maybe go somewhere a bit more exciting than Hobart. So I came to Melbourne instead. So I guess the great thing about the course structure for me and why I found it really appealing is, unlike a lot of other, law degrees and double degrees with law, is it can sort of extend out to be like a 6-year degree. Whereas the way I thought about the structure here is that, if you start off with a 3-year undergraduate course in arts, for example, when you get to major in different things, you get to actually try some interesting things. After those 3 years, you've actually got a degree and you've got something, to bank on. You've got something to, put it away. You've done it. You've achieved something. And I think that's really rewarding, but also it's practical for a lot of people, because I think if you got halfway through a 6-year or 5-year law degree and decided it wasn't for you anymore, you don't really get anything out of it. On paper, I guess you can say. Of course, you get the experience, but you don't really get the qualifications. So that's something I found quite appealing to the model here. I also, as someone who's really enjoyed legal studies and politics and sort of government frameworks, something I'm really excited about studying law here would be, when people come to it as a postgraduate degree, everyone's got a background in something. It's really interesting. Everyone's from different experiences. Some people from different universities, different countries, completely different courses, and I think that's something that really enriches a degree like that. To go on about my sort of experience in the short 3 to 4 months that I've been here, I found obviously very exciting. I think there's more people here in my course in the Bachelor of Arts than lived in my entire town, so it is obviously quite exciting for me. I had my first exam this morning and there was, I think, over 1,000 people there, so that was quite exhilarating. But overall, I think the experience for me, it's been very interesting. Melbourne's obviously a big city. It's very different to a rural town. But I've really enjoyed sort of the student experience here. There is such a great community here. One way I've really got involved is through the Art Student Society, called MAS, Melbourne Arts Student Society. I'll leave you to figure out why they had the Melbourne on there. But yeah, so that's really a great way to get involved. And earlier in the year, I actually participated in an arts camp. So we basically go 300 kilometres into country Victoria. This is all first years, and we all get to meet each other. And from that, I've made some really great friends. And there's always activities going on around the university. There's so many clubs and societies. I think on the clubs and societies there, I joined 12 to 14 clubs. I haven't been to all of them, but it's sort of something people get trapped into. But that's sort of the excitement of university when you start. There's so much to do, so many different clubs, so many different people to meet. There's such a great culture. There's always something going on. And I guess it really does improve study here.
Hi everyone, I'm Maggie Blandon. As Lockie already said, so I'm from Tassie as well actually. I'm from Hobart, so where he could have moved to.
None of them know I'm actually a Hobart boy myself. I had no hand in seeding the panel, just so you know.
Yeah, watch out guys. So I moved here at the start of this year obviously, and I'm a residential student at Trinity College. I'm majoring in hoping to major in criminology and politics and international studies. Like Lockie, I'm thinking of doing the JD as well, so the law degree at the end. And as Lockie said, I moved over here because I wanted to come over to Melbourne, live in the big city, and I loved the idea of coming over here and not just getting a law degree, but getting a broad knowledge from my arts degree. So I'm doing subjects like philosophy, media, gender studies, Islamic studies at the moment, and I'm finding that that's really going to impact on how I practice law at the end of my undergrad degree. So I'm really excited for that. At the moment, I started my arts degree with 4 possible majors, and it's actually gone down to 2 now. So as we were saying in the presentation before, it's really important to come over here, explore, find out what you're really passionate about. And so with my law degree at the end, I'll be studying, hoping to practice human rights law and criminal law. So at the moment, I'm trying to decide what majors are perfect for that. So yeah, it's really interesting to move over to the big city and get around that. So yeah, if anyone has any questions about residential colleges as well, I'd love to answer those. So thanks, guys.
Thank you. Please. That's quite a cross-section of experience right there. I said I wasn't going to prompt, but there's a couple of questions that I can't help myself from answering. One of them is, and I'm appreciating you're all at different stages of the journey, about whether you have or you're thinking about study abroad in some form.
I guess I'm probably the only applicable person who has done it. So I did my study abroad for my French diploma in the middle of my 3rd year. So 2 years ago now in 2016, basically what I did was I did semester 1 here, and then I finished, I think on a Friday. I caught a plane to France on a Saturday. I started my classes on Monday. I did 5 weeks of intensive French and art history. And then I caught the plane home and came back to university. I caught the plane home on Sunday and went back to university on Monday. So my whole mid-year break was studying. So that was exciting and really fun and incredibly valuable for me. So I didn't mention there, but I didn't study French in high school. So I started from level 1 and I went all the way to level 6. So going to France was a really great opportunity for me to actually immerse myself in language learning, and it's not a requirement. You can learn a language without travelling to the place where it's spoken, but it really does totally change your perspective on the use of language, because I'm not sure about other disciplines, but here we learn academic French after you get to a certain level, and I'm sure that's the same in most other languages. So getting the chance to use sort of more casual, colloquial language and learning how to be a more fluent speaker on a daily basis is something that is really valuable from studying abroad. And just the change in educational style as well is really exciting. Do you guys want to say abroad?
Yeah, so I'm the same. I haven't actually applied for anything yet, but I'm hoping to go on exchange at the end of my 2nd year. Not sure where I want to go yet, but I'm thinking Canada.
You're thinking of it?
Yeah, I haven't really thought too much into it, but I know there are sort of programs designed especially for courses as well. So there are a lot of for politics. I know they have a uni capital one, which is very very popular, where you get to go to the capital and intern you get to go to Washington and intern at the capital. So I know that's something It's quite exciting for a lot of people. It's something that I have to look into more of.
Fantastic. And they don't know I'm going to do this, but I am an academic, so I have to. We're now going to enter the assessment phase of the exercise. I have one last question, and of course, as you probably gathered if you'd looked at any of the University of Melbourne material, we love our slogans here at the University of Melbourne. If you had to come up with a slogan that best exemplified your experience of the BA as you've experienced it to date, what would it be? And I'm taking notes.
This is really challenging. Long. I'd say just incredibly flexible and quite perspective altering. The person I was when I started at 17 is very different to who I am now. And I think that the university and the bachelor's and the study that I did here is a big change. Also just ageing, but yeah.
Transformative education, I'm stealing that one, just so you know.
I hope the fact that I've been up since 4:30 will let me get away without a slogan and maybe just a word.
Yep, even better.
I sort of like the word encompassing because there's so much that you get to draw on in your degree. Already I've sort of learnt on so many different things in all my classes, things I didn't think I'd be learning about. So I guess that is the benefit of studying arts. There's a vast array of things you can study that you wouldn't have even thought about in high school. And I think that's the really important thing for a lot of people in year 11 and 12. It was only a few months ago that I was in your position, and I know how hard it is for a lot of people. You're asked to, figure out what you want to study with, never being at university. So it's really hard, and I guess that's the great thing about Bachelor of Arts is you actually get to have a feel around and really see the different things that are available.
I think my slogan would probably be a place to grow, inspire and to learn.
Perfect ending. And just that was my way of subtly exemplifying how BA students, in the BA we train you to think on your feet creatively, and that was very impressive. There's at least 2 or 3 ideas that I'm going to flat out steal, and people from external relations are considering it now. Thank you very much. If you could just join with me one more time in thanking our student panel. Thank you, guys. That brings us to the end of what we wanted to share with you about the BA tonight. However, we do have a few minutes, and appreciating that there are many opportunities still to come, some of which Nikki showed you in terms of formal events, but more generally in terms of the many people at the university who are more than happy at any time to field any questions you might have about opportunities here and programs here. We did want to set aside 5 or so minutes if there are any questions that we can help you with, including our student panel based on their experiences or anything I can assist you with now. So I will just briefly open it for questions now if anyone would like to ask any questions.